Now we're going to have a look at the system databases that make SQL Server work. And those are on this system databases folder. And you've probably seen those by now. You've seen the folder as we've been looking at user databases. I don't know if you've expanded it, but these are the system databases, and they control and govern how SQL Server does its thing. We'll start with the most important database, and that is the master database. The master database stores a lot of very important information. And if you expand the master, expand tables, and expand system tables, actually you're not going to see a whole lot. You'll see a couple SPTs, and then look in the views in the system views folder, and you'll see a ton of information. Okay, this is a little different if you've been used to a older version of SQL Server where the master database was stored data in tables and you could actually edit them. Everything in the new one is are views. So you can see when I open up that folder table, in fact we'll just use the Object Explorer details pane, there are very few tables that are actually in the master database. Most of master, the accessible portion that you guys can get to, is made up of system views. Everything is actually stored in a resource database that you can't really get to. But this is where you can get a lot of information. And master is important for a lot of reasons still, and we'll talk through all that. But essentially, everything that has to do with a server level is stored in master. Okay? So when you're talking security, so logins, anything to do with server roles, anything to do with the location of files, all that information is accessible through the master database and some of these system views. So it's very important that SQL Server know where its master database is. And we looked long ago in an earlier lesson at the SQL Server Configuration Manager, and the two parameters that are required to start your SQL Server service are basically two parameters that say, hey, where's my log file and my data file for my master database? There's also one for the actual like error log file, but has to know where master is. You can use master, these information schema folders, to get information about your databases, information about your security, your logons, any settings. Okay, it's all stored in master. So very important, and in a later lesson when we look at querying, we'll look at some of these information schema tables and what they can give you. But master, extremely important database. Think of it as the database that knows almost everything about your server. It knows where your databases are, not necessarily what's in them, but it knows where they are, logons, everything. So pretty much everything you see in this folder structure, audits, server objects, it knows a little bit about replication as far as how it's set up. You're always on high availability. Any of your management policy stuff, most of this stuff is stuff that master knows about, and that's where you get the information. Once you get into your user database has to understand kind of everything that's inside of it, but master knows where the user database is. Okay, so that's master. It's hugely important. That's why it's called master. Model I'm going to come back to. Let's look at MSDB. MSDB is your jobs database. Okay, this stores all the information about pretty much everything under the SQL Server agent node. So jobs, job history and activity, any alerts you may have configured, which I don't have any operators you've configured, again I don't have any, proxies, things like this. Everything that's pretty much under the SQL Server agent node is all in MSDB. This one's an actual database. You can look, and there's tables and there's all kinds of stuff. You can see some of the files that are here. So here's all your backup information that's in there. Log shipping data is in there. If you scroll down, you'll see there's some file group restore histories here. Here's some maintenance plan information, jobs and job history data, all your mail information. I mean, you can just scroll down. Here's policies, and they're pretty well named, so you can see what they are. Here's proxies, and the list goes on. So anything that has to do with jobs, job scheduling, alerting, emailing, anything along those lines, all goes in your MSD database. Packages, if you can store SSIS packages in MSDB, so pretty important database. It is a database, so you want to make sure that it is backed up regularly. That's very important, and if you do need to do a restore, there are some special things you'll have to take into account to do a system restore, and we'll talk about that when we talk about database restores. TempDB is basically just what it says. It's a temporary database. This is created someplace out on your server. It's just like every other database. It has files, okay? But it has, as you can see, no system tables. There are some temporary tables that are currently created in TempDB. It has no views, or I'm sorry, it has the information schema views. But basically, these are the very similar system views to what you'll see over in master. They're just available through TempDB as well. But it doesn't have anything in it really. I mean, what it's for is storing data temporarily. So if you create cursors, if you create temp tables in your T-SQL, they get stored here. Hence this temporary tables folder. You can see what temp tables got created. This is just kind of SQL Server's workspace. Okay, it's where it's kind of a scratch pad. It's where it does things as you're manipulating the system. So for example, if let me right-click TempDB. If I do a new query, even if I'm not in TempDB, say I'm in AdventureWorks, and I say create, and again, this is syntax you don't understand yet, but you will. I'm going to say create table, bang bang, test, and I'm just going to give it an ID int, and that's it. Just a single column table, create this table. And basically what I've done by using this bang bang, not bang bang, I'm sorry, hash hash, 2 hash marks like that, I've created a global temp table. So this table exists until I destroy this session. So if I refresh my little temporary table list, I'll see that table was created in TempDB. I didn't tell it where to create it. I was in AdventureWorks. And then once my session goes away, don't save my query, my temp table should get cleaned up and it goes away. Okay, so that's what TempDB is for. Temporary objects that you're creating, either temp tables, data from cursors, some variable data uses it. It's extremely important, but by no means should you back it up. As a matter of fact, if at the time that SQL Server starts, if there are no files in the location it expects there to be files for TempDB, it simply recreates them. If the files are there, they're truncated and everything is deleted out and it's set back to its initial size. Okay, so if you look at TempDB's properties, its initially size is 8 and 1. But it's also an autogrow. So my SQL Server's been up for a while, my TempDB's grown to 4 or 5 gig, and then I restart SQL, my TempDB drops back down to its initial size. It basically gets recreated every time you restart SQL. So pick an initial size that's correct for your environment. What that is a performance tuning kind of a thing, and again, a little more advanced than we're going to go into in this lesson. But if you regularly see your TempDB at 2 or 3 gigs, and the initial size is 8 meg, you might want to come in here, up the size so that it doesn't have to continually auto-grow. Okay, but that's TempDB, just sort of a scratch pad. Now, model is a database that is just what it says it is. It is a model for new system database or new user databases. So basically, all you do with model is set options. So these initial sizes here will carry over to initial sizes of a new database. Initial file groups, any options. So you can see my recovery model here is full. What's turned on, permissions like users and roles, extended properties. All this stuff that you set will carry over when you create a new database by default. So if I go ahead and right click and say new database, you can see my initial size is 3 megs. My owner is default. My recovery model is full. I have a primary file group. Okay, but if you come over to model here and you change it to say bulk log recovery model, and I want my initial size of databases to be 300 meg, and that's not a good one to do necessarily because of the fact that this model will also be 300 meg at this point, but if it will carry through. Options, I already did bulk log. Let's do that. Permissions, if there's a specific user that you always want to exist in all your new databases, you can come in here and set security in model. So you could add a new user in here. Okay, we haven't talked about users and permissions yet, but you could add a new user to model, and then new databases would automatically get that user as well. So now I'm going to go ahead, right-click, new database, and you'll see my initial size, 300 meg, and my recovery model is bulk log. Okay, so that's all model is it's basically the template database for all new user databases. If you're regularly creating a lot of user databases, you might want to set that so you kind of have some defaults in place. Model, you don't have to back up regularly. If you've made a lot of changes to it, you might want to back it up anytime you change it, but you don't need to worry about backing it up regularly. So from a standpoint of backups, back up your master and your MSDB as often as you can, especially if you've made a job change or added a database or something that would require will have made changes to master MSDB. Model backup if you've changed it and you've got a lot in there. I mean, some people don't even use model, so they don't even back it up. TempDB, don't worry about. There's one more system database we haven't talked about, and it's called the distribution database. Distribution database will get set up on any server that's configured as a replication distributor, and basically it's the database where SQL will store temporary transaction, not temporary, but store the transactions that are being replicated until such time that they can be pushed to all the subscribers. And replication is a whole huge other topic that we're not going to get into, but do know that there is a distribution database. It can have any name. By default, the name is distribution, but you're allowed to name it as you're setting up your replication environment. So it could be something else, but that database specifically controls replication. That's what that's for. So if you see a distribution database, that's what it is. All right, so that's pretty much the ins and outs of the system databases. Just keep in mind, master, extraordinarily important. MSDB, all your job stuff. TempDB, big scratch pad. Model, template, distribution is for replication. And that should be all you need to know about the system databases for now.